You fired decorated agents for doing their jobs. Senator Deborah Ross just confronted FBI Director Kash Patel with the most damning evidence yet of his political purge. What you're about to witness is a sitting FBI director being systematically exposed for turning America's premier law enforcement agency into Trump's personal hit squad.
I'm going a little out of order here because I'm going to pursue some of the things that you were just talking to Mr. Fry about and remind you about your confirmation hearing. At your confirmation hearing in January, you said under oath, and I quote, "There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed." And in your written response to the Senate questionnaire, you said, I quote, "Personnel decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law. And every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments." So I want to just go through a couple of scenarios with you to get a sense of whether you think these are examples of politicization of the FBI or making decisions based on the performance and adherence to the law. So, first question. Would hiring FBI agents, analysts, and supervisors from only one political party being politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Are you aware that in the lawsuit that Mr. Driscoll filed against you and the FBI, he was asked who he voted for?
Since that lawsuit has been filed that's ongoing litigation, I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question. Let me ask you an even easier one. Does firing agents for working on the cases that they were assigned to and that the president didn't like, is that politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
The FBI doesn't terminate anyone based on case assignments alone.
Has the FBI ever been sued by somebody who felt that they were terminated based on case assignments?
In the entire history of the FBI, I'm sure they have.
No, since your tenure.
I'm sure there's ongoing litigation.
Yes. In fact, there is ongoing litigation. And in fact, people have been asked who they voted for. And in fact, you are running an FBI for the President of the United States rather than the people of the United States, because my questions were not hypotheticals. They are the things you have done during your tenure. And according to a lawsuit filed last week by long-term FBI agents, you fired former acting director Brian Driscoll. He had served with the Bureau for nearly 20 years, earned a Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor for bravery during the dangerous ISIS raid, and had a wealth of crisis response experience and led the FBI's critical incident response group. When the Trump administrations interviewed Mr. Driscoll for that role, they interrogated him about his political leanings and who he voted for in the last 5 elections. Questions Mr. Driscoll refused to answer because those types of questions impermissibly politicized the FBI. You also fired Steve Jensen, who served the FBI for nearly 2 decades and ran critical terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations, whom you once described as embodying what the American public demands of the FBI. But he was fired because he took part in investigating crimes committed on January 6th. And Trump's MAGA base lambasted you online for keeping him at the FBI. So he's no longer at the FBI. You also fired a decorated combat veteran with decades of experience in the Bureau, Special Agent Walter Jardia, because he worked on the investigation into the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and helped investigate Trump's ally, Peter Navarro. Director Patel, it is very clear that you have flunked your own test. You've put saving your job, which I actually believe you were being honest about during your confirmation hearings, over doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. That is not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time of the gentleladies.
What Senator Deborah Ross accomplished in this exchange wasn't just effective questioning, it was a masterclass in exposing institutional corruption through methodical documentation. She didn't rely on dramatic flourishes or partisan attacks. Instead, she built an airtight case using Patel's own sworn testimony against his documented actions, creating a devastating portrait of an FBI director who has fundamentally betrayed the Bureau's mission. Ross began with a tactical advantage: Patel's confirmation hearing promises. Under oath, he explicitly pledged no political decision, no retributive actions, and personnel decisions based solely on performance and law adherence. These weren't campaign talking points. They were sworn commitments to Congress about how he would lead the nation's premier law enforcement agency. By anchoring her questions in his own words, Ross eliminated any wiggle room for deflection or reframing. The interrogation technique she employed reveals the systematic nature of Patel's misconduct. Ross didn't ask about isolated incidents or policy disagreements. She methodically walked through a pattern of behavior that transforms career law enforcement into political loyalty tests. When agents like Brian Driscoll were interrogated about voting history during interviews that crossed a constitutional line, the FBI's mission requires political neutrality precisely because law enforcement cannot function when it serves partisan masters rather than equal justice. Each firing Ross documented tells the same story. Steve Jensen, described by Patel himself as embodying what Americans demand from the FBI, was terminated for investigating January 6th. Walter Jardia, a decorated combat veteran with decades of experience, was fired for working on Russian interference investigations. These weren't performance-based decisions. They were political purges designed to eliminate agents whose professional duties conflicted with Trump's personal interests. The legal implications extend beyond personnel decisions. When FBI leadership asks agents about voting patterns or terminates them for investigating politically sensitive cases, it creates a chilling effect throughout the Bureau. Career agents begin self-censoring, avoiding cases that might anger political leadership. Complex investigations requiring sustained effort, organized crime, foreign interference, domestic terrorism, suffer when agents fear professional retaliation for following evidence wherever it leads. Patel's responses during Ross's questioning were equally revealing. His evasions about ongoing litigation and refusal to directly address the documented firings suggested someone who knows his actions cannot withstand scrutiny. When the FBI director cannot explain why decorated agents were terminated after working on cases the president opposed, that silence becomes its own form of admission. The constitutional stakes couldn't be higher. The FBI's independence isn't an abstract principle, it's a practical necessity for democratic governance. When law enforcement serves political loyalty rather than legal evidence, you get selective enforcement where some crimes are aggressively pursued while others involving political allies are ignored. That destroys equal justice under law and converts the Bureau into an instrument of political control rather than public safety. Ross's final assessment captured the fundamental betrayal. Patel chose saving his own position over protecting the FBI's mission. That choice reverberates through every investigation, every case, every interaction between federal law enforcement and American citizens. The ripple effects are measurable. Witness cooperation drops. Federal prosecutors lose cases because juries distrust politicized evidence, and state and local agencies hesitate to share intelligence with a compromised bureau. When people can't trust that justice operates fairly, regardless of political connections, the entire system loses legitimacy and effectiveness. The broader implications for national security are staggering. When the FBI becomes a political weapon, foreign adversaries exploit that weakness. Career counterintelligence agents who understand complex international threats are replaced with loyalists who prioritize political messaging over actual security. This leaves America vulnerable to exactly the kind of foreign interference and domestic extremism the Bureau exists to prevent. This exchange demonstrates why congressional oversight matters. Without senators like Ross demanding accountability, institutional corruption operates in shadows, gradually hollowing out democratic norms until the damage becomes irreversible. Democracy depends on citizens recognizing these moments and demanding their representatives act to preserve institutional integrity.